You said that I'm the first person that you've come across that doesn't identify as Mexican.
At least from my personal experience, yes.
I'm Mexican.
As far as your race, not
There you
nationality.
go. Okay, so technically, because I was born in Mexico, I am Mexican. Of course, there's nothing I could do about that to take it away because nationality is nationality. However, when it comes to Mexican is not a race. But
Mm-hmm.
the misconception has been that la raza mexicana, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's not a real thing. That's not a real thing. Because in the 1800s, the which I've done plenty of videos of this before, but in the 1800s, pretty much the Mexican government um, was pretty much prohibiting indigenous tribes from identifying as indigenous as with their indigenous tribe. You know, for example, Zapotec, Mixtec, Purepecha, Tarahumara. Not only prohibit them from identifying as tribe, but also kind of forcing them to just take on the blanket identity of Mexican. So ever since the 1800s, we've been identifying as Mexican under the impression that that is our race. But the initial reason behind it is obviously because it's a systemic effort to ethnically erase us and or detach us from our real tribal identity, which is why ever since then we've been identifying as Mexican. So because we've been identifying as just Mexican, por eso mismo is why we are under the impression that Mexican is a race because we haven't had any other option. So a lot of people like you, I assume you were born in the US.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people like you who identify as Mexican because maybe your parents are from Mexico or your grandparents. Either way, you are under the impression that you descend from the race of Mexican people. Of course. That's how we all have been identifying as. And that's why I'm very careful in approaching this subject because I am literally ripping our own people from what we've developed pride around. Who the hell am I to detach somebody from their pride, from everything they've come to love? Like any Mexican that is a proud Mexican is very proud of it. Is very like orgullo mexicano and things of that nature. I was one of those people too. The only difference is that I've been on a journey to find the truth, and while looking for the truth is doing so objectively, meaning detaching my emotional biases and also what I've developed a pride in. So I have had to be very objective. When you're searching for the truth, you got to be objective because if you're biased, you can't. You can't. So I was born into a Catholic household, raised by Catholics as a Mexican. I am the typical dude. I'm literally the goddamn blueprint of el mexicano cara de nopal con la Virgen de Guadalupe, all that good stuff. But in order for me to look for the truth, I had to disregard everything I've ever fell in love with, everything I've developed pride around, and be truly objective when I'm searching for the truth. So I'm gonna be honest with you. When I realized that being Mexican was literally just a systemic effort, it broke my heart because I know how many millions and millions of us have identified as Mexican. It's not our fault. It's not our fault, dude. I mean, how could it be our fault? We were born into this. You get what I'm saying? So, if it was difficult for me to detach myself from this, I could only imagine somebody who's not as objective as I am. I consider myself truly objective. I'm willing to learn anything, even if it goes against what I grew up believing, what I've been indoctrinated with. That's why I'm able to be the person that I am today. As soon as I learn something new and I confirm it's true, I painfully have to detach what I've been indoctrinated with and be like, you know what? This is my journey. I do believe you that I'm the only person that you've ever come across that doesn't identify as Mexican as an ethnicity. That I believe. That I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, I said a disclaimer like all my Mexican friends and fam, don't come for me because that's a very, I know race is a touchy subject as it is,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
I just wanted to talk to you because I think it would be helpful for even Native Americans to be educated on, which I'm sure they are. A lot of us are very educated, but I feel like my issue with the Indigenous community or the Native community is that it's only U.S. for Canada base. If you're enrolled, if you're, a tribal member or anything like that. But it's like, what about everybody south of the border?
Yep.
Are they not Indigenous too, or Native Americans too? And a lot of people don't classify them as Native Americans. It's Latino, like you said. So it was very interesting having this conversation with you and, seeing you kind of educate people about nationality and ethnicity and race, and especially being from the U.S., we're very race-centered. Yeah, you're American, but you're African-American, or you're this, or you're that, or you're black, or you're that. And it's like, it's very, it's not, American is not seen as a race. But for some reason, Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, and Dominicans, they're all seen as a race.
There you go.
I understand they identify with the culture and nationality, but it's like, when you look in the mirror, do you see yourself as a Dominican or as a Mexican? Because there's a lot of, racism and, favoritism going on within those Latin countries. And I feel like somebody like you could be a voice for people who are, south of the border, can realize, okay, what are you? Because I have a lot of personal stories, even with my own family, that is like, okay, and, having you on here, I just really wanted to get your perspective and have a deep conversation about this and see what we can learn from each other's experience, I guess.
You've identified your life as a Mexican?
My dad, he's Native American and black. So me, I've always had, in a way, identity issues. Like, it's kind of hard for mixed people to identify with just one race, no matter what they look like. So that's where I wanted to get your input as far as being Indigenous from Mexico. What led you to that? Like, what led you to deconstruct from the word Latino, and like, what experience did you have, and how can you educate more Native Americans, not just in the U.S. and Canada, but also south of the border, to identify with their, Indigenous roots or lineage?
Obviously, I can't force anybody to identify any kind of way, but that's the reason why, like, the content that I create is usually a conversation like the one we're having, where it's a split screen and it's just two people having a conversation about it, and I share it. And that's my way of saying, I didn't come on here to preach to you. I'm sharing a conversation. If you want to learn from this, if you want to take something from it, take it and keep moving and apply it, But whatever the case, do I think it's important that Indigenous people of Canada and the U.S. learn to view and accept that Indigenous people of Mexico, Central and South America are also Indigenous people? Absolutely. However, my first goal before trying to encourage Indigenous people of U.S. and Canada to embrace us, my first goal is to see, could we embrace our own Indigenous identity? Because that is one of the things that we have a difficult time doing, because we much rather identify with something that's exotic, like Latino or whatever else, right? Latinx, something sounds cool, because being an Indio is just not cool. It's inferior and things of that nature. So